Thanks for joining us today on the Big Blue Podcast. I'm Greg Stone, Southeast Campus Provost, and I'm joined as always by our president, Dr. Lee Goodson. How are you today, Dr. Goodson?
I'm doing great. It is a beautiful day.
It is a really beautiful day. It's a little warm. I'd like a little more spring-like weather for a while before we get to summer.
Yes,
but
and I missed the last round of the Big Blue Podcast recordings. Let's see. I think the last time I was here, it was windy and cold.
And cold back in
March, I think. Yeah. So.
Anyway, we've got Lindsay White here today, Senior Strategy Advisor to the President, who's going to talk about where we're at with our strategic plan process and specifically about mission, vision, and values work. So, Lindsay, thanks for coming over today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad that your boss, whoever he or she may be, allowed you to get out of the office for a little bit.
She's a very kind boss, so I thank her for more than just that every day.
Yeah, that's our public image anyway, right, Lindsay?
So, Lindsay, let's start off. Remind us why it's important to take the time that we've been taking, and you've been leading this work the last several months, to review and revise our mission, vision, and values before we start the next iteration of the strategic plan. How does this process inform that one?
Absolutely, that's a great question. I mean, the mission, the vision, and values, they really serve as the foundation for everything we do. So it really gets to the heart, and the mission gets to the heart of why we exist, what is our purpose for being, which sounds very lofty, but it really is. In order to be able to serve as a guide for us, for who we are, what we do, who we aspire to be, they're really important guiding documents. And so it serves as the foundation. If that's who we are, what we want to be, the strategic plan is going to help us figure out how do we get there. And if we don't know who we want to be, where we want to go, and what we want to look like, we really don't know what we need to do to get there. So if the strategic plan is what we want to do to get there, we have to know where we're going first. And so the timing is really perfect, is really right. As we come to the end of our current strategic plan in 2020, the time is perfect to do this revision of the mission, vision, and values.
And I guess there might be some people who, and I can understand why they would say, yeah, but we're a college, we know what we do. Why do we have to do this? We're here to teach people, and what else is there, right? But there's a little more to it than that, though.
Well, I think there's the need, the desire, and also the benefit that we have at any organization of rallying around a common purpose. And I think that when it's difficult for people to articulate that purpose in any sort of concise, meaningful way, it's hard for people to rally around it. So if you were to ask 10 different people, what is it that we do at this community college? What is our purpose? You might get 10 different answers. And although that might be accurate for all of them, it is valuable for us to have something that we can all remember, that we can all recite, that we can all use as our common I say battle cry, but really that's what it is. It needs to be a mantra and something that we can all recite and remember as an elevator speech about what our college is really for. What are we here for?
So we already have a mission, vision, and values that I think the last time the college redeveloped that was it 2004?
Yes,
I think
it's been a
maybe.
while.
So can you tell us what kind of feedback as we went through the last strategic plan without redoing the mission, vision, and values? Can you tell us what kind of comments we got during that process that led us to decide to go ahead and redo it before we embark on the strategic plan next year?
So some of the things that we heard in our feedback gathering was that it was too long, our current mission was too long, and that we wanted it to be memorable. And in order for it to be memorable, that it had to be shortened. So there was a general consensus that there is a lot of really rich information about what we do and who we are in that document right now, that it was almost too much, and that it was hard to pick out what was most important because there was so much information in there. Having said that, we also recognized as we were doing the revision that the group that wrote the last mission statement spent a lot of time really looking at that. And so we wanted to honor that work that they had done and ask people, what do you like about the current mission that you want to keep? What do you want to move away from? And so we got a lot of really good information from that is using that as the basis by which we move forward instead of saying, well, let's start from scratch. We already have an idea who we are. We already have an idea where we have been. But one thing I will mention, with mission, vision, and values, just like with any, with teaching and learning or any sort of industry or field, best practice of what you want something to portray changes from decade to decade. It changes from year to year. And so really mission, vision, and values have tended towards and are trending towards shorter, more memorable statements. So the longer mission statement really was more common at that time, and it's becoming a trend, or it has become a trend, to have to have a mission, vision, values that are a little bit shorter, a little bit more concise. So we're really just using that best practice of analyzing what we're doing and making it more in terms of, making it more current in terms of what we need, but also in terms of best practice.
You've presented several times in the last few months at Dr. Goodson's Open Lines events that all faculty and staff are invited to, and you've presented to the supervisors and budget owners groups and sort of given them an overview of the process. But for people who maybe haven't attended one of those presentations, can you just give us like a quick overview of how we got to where we're at this point and what the next step is?
So in the fall of 2018, we did really broad feedback gathering with internal stakeholders and external. So as you mentioned, Greg, many of the internal stakeholders were able to attend those open line sessions that we did, or the supervisor and budget owner. We did a special session with Faculty Association and with College Staff Association. They might not have seen the community sessions. We did a couple of community focus groups, which were Dr. Goodson attended. They were really fantastic to get to hear what the community thinks about us. And then student feedback gathering as well via posters that we had up at all the campuses, and some sessions with student government as well. So it's been a very broad feedback gathering. And when we started, we were really asking questions like, why did you choose TCC? What do you think are our biggest strengths? So really we started very broad with the feedback gathering. And then again, as I mentioned, looking at our current mission to see what people like the most. So that's what it's looked like with the broad feedback gathering. And then a small writing team got together, and I need to give a shout out to everyone. Skylar Brown, Kurt Brewer, Keedron, Dotson, who am I forgetting? Nicole Bergen. So there was a small group of myself, of course. There was a small group that really took a first stab at that, and then we've added some people to the team as well. Sean Liggins, Lisa Giroux. I don't have these names written down, so I'm trying to recall
That is
them.
the most dangerous.
It is dangerous, I know, but it's important. I
you
mention
wanna
this
acknowledge
because
them.
they have done a ton of work, and to sit there and wordsmith, and it's. I've never thought there could be so much discussion about one preposition sometimes, but it really has been a really valuable. Julie Baston. I remember the other day, Julie Baston. So give a shout out to them. But we've basically just gone back and forth with showing the cabinet, and then showing the board, and then doing it again at open line, showing everyone what that looked like, and then taking that feedback back to the writing team to say, here's what we heard, let's fix what we can fix. And so we've already changed it a lot based on the feedback that we got, received this spring, and taking it back to everybody.
Well, I'm Lee Goodson, here with my co-host, Dr. Greg Stone, Provost of the Southeast Campus, and you're listening to the Big Blue Podcast. Our guest today is Lindsay White, and we've been talking about all the work that our institution is doing to ensure that our vision, mission, and values represent who we are and what we do. Lindsay, do you mind sharing the draft mission statement? I know sometimes things aren't ready for prime time, but you've put a lot of work into this, as has the writing team, and you mentioned their names earlier. Would you feel comfortable sharing the draft as it currently stands? And then maybe talk to us a little bit about the key concepts we're trying to capture.
So the current mission draft has gone through various iterations. And what we've landed on as of now is to engage our community in creating lifelong learning and opportunity. And some of the concepts that we're trying to capture is the fact that we're a community college and we do so much here. We really wanted to use terminology that was broad enough that we were capturing activities of everyone. So, for example, if you are a teacher at the Child Development Center, they're teaching children. If they're continuing education, they're sometimes doing training opportunities that aren't for credit. So we wanted to be able to capture a lot of activities. So that speaks to some of the broad language. We also wanted to recognize that we could be a transition for some people and being a gateway or a transition between one educational experience for them and another, or we might be there for a very long period of time for them. So that's where that lifelong learning concept, which of course is not, unique to us, but it was important for us as the community college in being in so many people's lives for so long here in the community, in Tulsa community. We wanted to capture that kind of, lifelong learning concept. What else is in there? There's I think it's interesting when you're crafting the mission, there's this fine line between being vague and being specific. And so I think there's a balance that we were trying to create in that mission, and something that is specific enough that it can provide some guardrails for us, but also vague enough that different people and different stakeholders feel like they can also buy into that mission and use that as their mantra and their battle cry, so to speak.
And before we wrap things up, let's talk about the values, because the presentation of values, at least as they're in the current draft form, are pretty different than how they've been presented before. What's the benefit of taking this approach? And maybe you could just sort of briefly describe the approach for people, again, who haven't been a part of these conversations to see the drafts.
Yeah, so the values, ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to express what are the beliefs that we have that guide our behavior and how we're doing our work. And so we wanted to have values that were not generic and that were very specific to TCC. And I think that's one of the main criteria that we had, is we want our values to sound like us. And so while we have some excellent core values right now, we wanted to make sure that that we had values that sound like TCC. So when we talk about, quality education being accessible or everyone can learn, that's not something that necessarily is valued by other educational institutions. So we're hoping that these statements, this will be a series of statements for our values, that those are statements that we can use to, I say, call each other out, not in a negative way, but in a good way, to remind each other, that, hey, we have to make sure that everyone can learn. Let's remind ourselves that that's one of the things that we value. Or if we're talking about whether a practice is sustainable or something like that, we can say we have to be good to community. Community is our middle name, so that we can use these statements in our everyday lives, in our meetings, to remind ourselves, is this decision that I'm making going to be in concert with the value that we know is central to who we are and who we want to be?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I think, the format of the values has been a pretty significant topic of discussion. Some people have, in the feedback sessions, some people have thought, oh, those are awesome, it's my favorite part, and some have had kind of a challenge getting accustomed to them. But I think the writing team has done a good job of trying to meet everybody where they are,
And I have to say, the feedback that we have gotten has been fantastic in terms of providing suggestions of how to make something, I don't want to say fix it, but really to be able to not just, I don't like this, but here's a specific suggestion on how this might work to solve a certain problem. And so I feel like the feedback gathering that we've done has been effective, and that we have ended up with a better product than what we had initially. And that was, I think a lot of people have felt that way.
It's kept getting better.
Mm-hmm. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, we have one question left, Lindsay, and we asked this of everybody on the show, and we're not sure how you answered it last time because it was on video, and that was a long time ago.
It's been a while.
Greg and I have no memory of that probably by now. But if you could go back in time and give advice to your 18-year-old self, and you had a pretty exciting life, especially after college. If you could give yourself a piece of advice before you started college, what would it be?
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have no idea what I said last time. And actually, as I looked at the interview questions, I thought maybe I should figure out what I said last time and go with that. And I have no recollection.
Sounds like we're all in a safe place.
We're all in a safe place.
Yeah.
I feel confident that I would not have listened to myself, first of all, if I could have given myself
Good
advice. However, I might have suggested to work through all of my schooling before I had children, because I feel like that would have been much easier to do before I had a full-time job and kids. And I know that advice wouldn't work for everybody, but I think that's probably what
Is
I've
that
told
because you're in
myself.
the thick of it right now?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. That's why I'm confident my answer was much different last time I talked to you. Nothing like the present to shape my my
you'll-
answers.
There you go.
You'll
There you
finish
go.
before you know it, and you won't ever read a book again, and then someday you will.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, you've been listening to the Big Blue Podcast, and we want to thank our guest, Lindsay White, Senior Strategy Advisor to the President, for being with us today. Lindsay, thanks for coming over. And thanks to all of you for listening. Remember, you can catch us each week in the week at TCC and on the Creativity channel at YouTube, and we will see you next time.